My goodness. Germany is looking to take on the Ruskies with a brand new set of vehicles, but the interesting thing about these vehicle types is that they haven't been seen for nearly half a century, and yet might be the answer to gaining the upper hand. I mean, they worked halfway decently the last time the two countries fought, so why not give them a shot, I say? Fresh take on an old classic, the like and subscribe button, and let's talk about it. Yes, today we are talking about tank destroyers and mobile AA guns, two things that fit firmly in the cool niche design that doesn't really work anymore category, even if wearaboos on Reddit can't seem to wrap their heads around that. But that might all be changing soon, and Rheinmetall seems to be leading the charge on that one. This is the Sky Ranger, a new unmanned weapon that blasts 30mm rounds at a face-melting 1200 rounds per minute. For reference, that is the same rate of fire as the MG42, but I'm sure those numbers are just coincidental. But Germany just ordered 600 of these bad boys for the total price of 9 billion euros, roughly 10.4 billion US dollars. The plan for these is to be slapped on to their new Boxer vehicles. But this isn't the Sky Ranger. This is the Sky Ranger. And before I explain what I just said there, I need to mention our old friends over at the USCCA, a national gun owners organization with over 860,000 members. This is your one-stop shop for courses, classes, and access to legal support as it relates to the world of arming yourself to protect you and your family. By joining, you'll gain access to the Protector Academy, a secure online platform packed with reading material, video lessons, digital books, and more, along with an included subscription to Concealed Carry magazine. Most importantly, you'll gain access to their network of legal representation and self-defense liability insurance. Even when you are forced into a self-defense situation and did everything right, it's still going to cost you your time, money, and could still potentially land you in jail. With the USCCA's trusted legal reps, you can carry knowing that you're not just physically protected, but legally too. If you want to support the channel, make sure to sign up today using the link you see on the screen, and you'll see what unique training opportunities are open for you. Thank you again to the USCCA, and now back to the video. The Sky Ranger isn't a vehicle, it's actually just the turret on top. It's also not German, it's from Switzerland, but more on that part later. Also, it's not just the gun, it's a series of 4 optionally manned air defense systems you can slap onto any vehicle that can handle the weight, and includes a dedicated radar platform, 2 designed to fire missiles, and 1 with the big gun on top. That gun comes in 2 flavors, one in 30mm and one in 35mm. The difference in calibers between the 2 models, known as the Sky Ranger 30 and 35 respectively, is intended so that a country can use whatever ammo they already have. So for example, the United States is buying more and more things that fire 30mm ammo, and so we theoretically could buy Sky Ranger 30s and use the same rounds as before. Sky Rangers were first shown off back in 2021, around the same time that most Western militaries realized that using super expensive missiles to take down a cheap quadcopter drone was a fast-track plan to bankrupting your entire military budget. These are classified as SHORAD platforms, or short-range air defense. While things like Patriot batteries are designed to be stationary long-range assets, the idea behind Sky Rangers and other SHORADs is that they're integrated with maneuver formations. So while tanks and infantry push forward, these will hang back a bit and create a nice little defensive bubble in the airspace for the fighty boys to work under. These aren't going to be intercepting stealth bombers or hypersonics anytime soon, but they can keep things like strike aircraft, helicopters, and most importantly drones from sending you off into the great beyond. The primary weapon on the Sky Ranger in the 30 model is the 30x173 KCE revolver cannon. And revolver cannons are exactly what they sound like, a cylinder with multiple chambers that rotates at a very high speed way. It's the same way the pistol version works, except instead of a cowboy wannabe pulling the trigger, it's an electric motor loading and spinning it at insanely high speeds. These kinds of cannons were originally designed for aircraft. Because aircraft guns are fast and lightweight, they became a pretty clever thing to stick on the ground. The one specifically from the Sky Ranger is a modified KCA 30mm, originally used on the Saab 37 Viggen fighter. My first question when seeing this is, why are we switching from rotary cannons to single barrel cannons like we did before? Fan favorite guns like the minigun and the Avenger on the A-10 both have multiple barrels that rotate because it allows each barrel to cool off just a little bit before firing again. That means you can fire longer without it overheating. Well, it turns out there are a couple reasons. One is that rotary designs are just heavier and more complex. And both of those add huge headaches from a maintenance and logistics standpoint, and spinning long, heavy barrels over just the chamber uses a lot more power. Because the Sky Ranger has to get its electricity from the actual vehicle engine itself, if you want your fancy gap piece to work on smaller or older vehicles, you need to limit the power draw so you don't fry the whole thing. Single barrels are also more accurate. Rotary guns are great if a human person is doing the aiming, but improvements in computers and fire control systems means we can take advantage of that accuracy more than ever, which helps save ammo. The slight deviation in the barrel as it spins in those kinds of weapons causes some drift, and sometimes that's intentional, like on C-rams or chopper gunners, but not what we want to use in this scenario. And finally, a good reason only using one barrel is this part of the gun right here. That chunky wire you're seeing connecting to the muzzle brake programs airburst rounds. As the bullet leaves the barrel, it is wirelessly programmed in the muzzle brake on where and when to explode based on all the fancy quick math that the targeting computer comes up with. Now, a single barrel does come with some limitations. These are designed to fire in bursts rather than long sustained rates and do theoretically heat up faster, but again, theoretically, that doesn't matter because you should be hitting your targets with these more reliably. But if it's that great and accurate, why does it need to fire 1,200 rounds per minute? Well, if you ask that question, I imagine you hate watching a beautiful sunrise because it's not an optimal use of your time. But also, air targets move really fast and Sky Rangers are line-of-sight weapons. Therefore, the amount of time you have to engage your target is very small. So 1,200 rounds per minute means you can get a lot of rounds on target in a very short window and inflict as much damage as you can. Sure, 1,200 rounds per minute might be a little fast in some cases, but complaining about that is like door dashing from Hooters. Sure, that was probably the most efficient way of doing things, but you're kind of missing the point of the whole experience. The gun itself has a max range of 3,000 meters, a little short of 2 miles, and the idea would be to spread them out so that there is a tiny bit of overlap between that distance and the next Sky Ranger next to you. But that number goes up when you consider the other weapons that it can fire. See, these turrets were outfitted with missile launchers, and everything from old Stingers to future ones like the Sky Knight missile can be used. All munitions are aimed and tracked using the onboard AESA radar, giving 360 degrees of coverage around the platform. As cool as the spinny radar dish thing is on top of older AA guns, the AESA in a practical sense detects everything around itself all the time and with a much higher level of fidelity. Each turret carries 300 rounds ready to go, but the overall ammo capacity of the gun is dependent on whatever vehicle it's slapped on top of. That gives you 15 seconds of fully automatic firing before you need to reload, so maybe consider switching it over to semi-auto every now and then. There are two different kinds of rounds currently used in the 30mm version, the PMC-308, which is the same airburst round used on the Puma IFV, and the newer PMC-455, which manages to nearly quadruple the number of tungsten projectiles the same round can carry for the same weight by making it smaller. In the Sky Ranger 35 model, it uses the PMD series of rounds that basically do the same thing, just in a slightly bigger caliber. Crews can choose which kind of ammo they want to carry based on the threat they are expected to come up against. Rule of thumb, the smaller the number that comes after the letters, the fewer bits of tungsten it contains, but the larger each one of them are. If you're trying to destroy helicopters or planes, you're going to want the bigger ones, but you'll have fewer bits of shrapnel. But if your target is something like a drone, you will want more, but smaller. These are called AHEAD rounds, or Advanced Hit, Efficiency, and Destruction, which, I don't know, man, we didn't need to make that into an acronym, but apparently the Brits came up with that one, so do with that as you will. There's been a growing trend of just making the spinny gun part to sell to countries, rather than trying to sell an entire vehicle. Because the turrets are unmanned, it means it doesn't take any space up in the actual hull of the vehicle, which means big or small, you can slap that shit on anything pretty much. Only selling the turrets means you can upgrade your entire fleet for cheap and slap them onto older hulls that weren't doing much else except sitting around. And that's how we get cursed combinations of Sky Ranger Leopard 1 combos. So while we get to now bask in the resurrection of the old SPAAG platform, we also get to enjoy the return of the Tank Destroyer. Tank Destroyers were classes of armored vehicles that were fairly lightly armored in terms of actual protection, but still carried a big gun meant to punch through opposing tanks, hence the name. While these look a lot like tanks, it's better to envision them as Ds that can drive around, in the same way that self-propelled artillery looks like a tank, but you absolutely would not want to use them like that, unless of course you recently checked the box next to the "I have thoughts of harming myself" on the doctor's intake form. Hopefully that role should be even more apparent now, because Rheinmetall and Lockheed Martin teamed up to create this, the Fuchs Jagm missile tank destroyer. And notice the lack of tubular hardware you or I would refer to as a gun. Simply put, this is the godless love child of the Rheinmetall Fuchs armored vehicle and the Lockheed Martin joint air-to-ground munition missile. And it is, by all intents and purposes, a modern tank destroyer. The Fuchs is a relic in its own right, originally designed way back in 1961 as an amphibious armored personnel carrier. However, the version used in this is the Fuchs Evolution. Originally intended to carry a squad of 9 brave Bundeswehr soldiers, the new version instead carries a box with 24 ATGM missiles in the back. While shown off with Jagm specifically, they can also carry the family favorite Hellfire missiles. Both of these started life as ammo for attack helicopters, and then someone had the bright idea of not strapping them to flying metal death traps. And ever since, we've been seeing them on tons of different ground-based platforms. It carries the rounds via 6 vertical launching boxes, each carrying 4 missiles, giving you 24 in total. And these launchers specifically are themselves godless love childs between the M299 launcher, developed for helicopters, and the Mark 41 VLS used on US Navy warships. The trick with these is that the missiles don't exactly launch themselves. The heat and exhaust from that would damage the launcher and the vehicle and the missile, so it uses a compressed gas generator that pops them up, and then the motor engine ignites once it's free of the tube. The Fuchs Jagm platform can hit targets up to 8 kilometers away, and your first thought was probably my first thought: ain't no way that little camera on top can see 8 kilometers away and then give a solid lock on. At least I assume that was your first thought. Your first thought very well could have been, why does this thing have 3 small windshield wipers instead of 2 big ones? And the answer to that is parts commonality, but we won't dive too deep into the woods there. But it turns out that sensor might be able to see that far. See, the electro-optical sensor, which operates as a viewfinder and laser designator, telescopes up about 14 feet from the ground. While kinda goofy looking, this combined with the fact that the missiles are launched vertically instead of horizontally is huge. It basically means that the vehicle doesn't have to present itself as a potential target at all. While other launchers that fire directly at a target need a direct line of sight between the two, the Fuchs Jagm could sit in a 360-degree cover and concealment position, spot targets from above said cover and concealment, and then launch straight up. While this does reduce the range of the missiles a little bit, because they have to gain altitude first, the trade-off is more than worth it. But that viewfinder might not even be necessary either. Both the Jagm and Hellfire can be configured to fire on targets designated by other things. So it could be a drone flying over an enemy fighting position, or a guy with a target designator on the ground. Meanwhile, the actual launcher vehicle sits in the back, safe and sound. While 8 kilometers is the current max range of this, versions of both missiles are currently being tested that have much longer ranges, and each of these used 9-kilogram tandem fragmentation warheads, which is a mouthful way of saying they're designed to be able to punch through reactive armor tiles on tanks. Both are also semi-active laser-guided. Hellfires require a constant designation with a laser, while the Jagms include a small radar in the guidance section that gives redundancy. This helps in case something happens to the laser beam, like smoke, debris, or the guy holding it got bored and decided to do something else with his time. The launcher is able to coordinate multiple targets at once, and the only limiting factor is getting something to lock onto the target itself, meaning theoretically, if you managed it with 24 missiles at your disposal, you could, theoretically again, wipe out 2 or 3 entire companies' worth of armored vehicles in a single salvo. See, both the Sky Ranger and the Fuchs Jagm are pretty standard in terms of how military technology is evolving in the post-GWOT 21st century. Neither of these are revolutionary, really, at all. They're basically Frankenstein amalgamations of technology we already had, and then slapping it onto vehicles we've had even longer. The Sky Ranger is, at its core, a modified aircraft gun from the 70s, attached to a remote-controlled joystick. The only real technological innovation happening in this is the targeting software and detection methods that allow the gun to hit with reliable accuracy, and the airburst munitions that we've been tinkering around for decades now, but are now finally at a mature technological level. The Fuchs Jagm is, again, a combination of things we've had for a hot minute now, with the biggest innovation just coming in the form of the containerization of the rounds in the back, which themselves are just modifications to designs we've been using for other purposes. Even the Jagm missile itself, which came about only within the last few years, only really differs from the Hellfire, which has been around since 1984, in the fact that it has an improved guidance method. And said guidance method is the same one we used for many decades, just smaller. But these both solve, or at least partially solve, the issue of creating vehicle platforms that fit on current battlefields and don't require decade-long, multi-billion-dollar government acquisition programs. I would argue that these are good designs, on paper at least. They make sense, at least in the context of adding highly maneuverable firepower without breaking the bank. But while these make sense on paper, is there any proof that they work in real life? Well, for the Sky Ranger, the short answer is yes. More and more countries are adopting gun-centric air defense platforms, or bringing back older ones that were already retired. The American Sergeant Stout is a good example, and I love it just for the name alone. According to all accounts, so far for the German Flakpanzer Gepards that were donated, they've been performing pretty decently in Ukraine, targeting both small and large drones on top of slower-moving cruise missiles. But what about tank destroyer firing Hellfire thing? Well, similarly, more and more platforms are being outfitted with those missiles specifically, including the aforementioned Sergeant Stout. Because those turrets are modularly designed around the gun itself, commanders can pick and choose which configuration they want based on what targets they're expected to engage. Hellfires have been murking tanks with devastating results since the 80s, and they've only gotten better since then. But a glorified armored car carrying 24 of them would probably work pretty well as intended. While advertised that it can gauge all 24 targets at once, I would imagine it would still mostly just be firing one, maybe two in a single shot until at least we get better at meshing together the kill chain using drones. But a lot of effort has been placed into these sort of mini-launch missile boxes in recent years. Taiwan, for example, put Hellfires in a civilian cargo truck and launched them that way. So even if you have some kind of autistic hatred against the Fuchs APC, we theoretically could stick a box of 4 missiles on anything that could carry it from A to B. The trend continues of adapting very deadly munitions for purposes they were never really designed for, but via happy accidents and improvements in digital sensing, every vehicle with a flat top these days is the definition of free real estate. But let me know what you think, and on that note, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.